Buffett is rule number one, never lose money. Rule number two is never forget rule number one. Well, if Warren Buffett was South African, he would have said rule number two is never, ever forget rule number one. So I'm going to share with you some traps that really I've seen through my direct experience and also through the experience of engaging with many of you, literally having been blessed to support and guide thousands of aspiring growing property investors in South Africa over the last few years. These are mistakes that are costing too many people too much money, and they are breaking rule number one of Warren Buffett. So let's look at a few things. We're going to go through them quite quickly, and then you can tell me, if you want me to unpack any of those, either, in one of the upcoming episodes. So bear with me, because we also have a special contribution by Christian Jansen, which I don't want you to miss out on. So Christian, what you can do in the meanwhile to get ready for your special contribution is to maybe join me by clicking the speak button so that you can join me into the front row. You can see that there is a beautiful slot underneath me for you to join. So if you do that, then at least you will be ready to jump in right away when your opportunity comes. So looking at the realities of investing in property in South Africa, in 2024 and beyond, one simple way, but one quick way to actually lose money is to invest. Okay, so let me see here. Christian, I've accepted, is to invest in sectional schemes, in body corporates that are broke. They're actually broke. They call it being broke. It's not just about being broke from a financial perspective. That's very, very important. But they're also broke in terms of the governance, in terms of how they operate or how they don't operate, in terms of the systems, the protocols. Christian, I can see you, which is great. You want to do a microphone check?
I already did as I started checking in, so I think I'm ready.
Fantastic. We can hear you, we can see you. The show is going to be yours just in a few minutes. So number one is be exceptionally wary of broke body corporates, and simple hack: every offer to purchase that you make has to be made subject to acceptable due diligence on the financial performance of the body corporate. Do not buy any property that does not have that clause in your offer to purchase. Do not trust any agent tell you that the body corporate financials are great. Do not trust any seller. Do not trust anybody, because you need to make sure that those body corporates are basically financially viable. And if you don't, it's only gonna get worse. Number two is quick ways to deal with nightmare tenants. I've had a situation just last week where I met some prospective tenants for a property of mine, a commercial property of mine, and the corporate profile was great, and I was sent references, and the references on paper looked great, until I tried to contact the previous landlord reference, and I couldn't get the previous landlord to speak with them. I couldn't get through to them. And then I started digging a little deeper, and I did a credit check on both the directors and the company, and it turned out that the payment track record was absolutely atrocious. And I don't want to say that these guys were fraudsters, but they certainly totally misrepresented their payment track record. So they gave references hoping that I was not going to check those references. And that's a big hack. When you get references, do not assume that just because you are given a written reference, those references are genuine, because a lot of people believe that you are never going to contact them. So always make sure that you contact either a reference or the previous landlord, or even better, 2 previous landlords. What they didn't know, and that's how I caught them out, is that they didn't know that the previous landlords had captured the tenant behavior, the tenant payment profile on TPN. And that gave me the hedge to avoid a real nightmare of a tenant. So, and a lot of tenants, a lot of prospective tenants do not know that agents and agencies capture the payment behavior on the system. So that what I wanted to sort of like share with you as a very practical hack is, if you own properties, go and register on TPN so you can run your own credit profiles. Because when you have to run the credit profiles, if you're not registered, and first you need to register as a registered user, it might take a day or 2 for you to get approved as a registered user. And by then, you might as well lost your tenant. Maybe it was a good tenant, you lost it because it took you 3 days to do a credit check. And very often, when they are in the process of finding the property, they're not necessarily applying to your property. They might be applying to 2 or 3 properties at the same time. So go register on TPN so that you can run those credit reports independently. And that's very, very powerful. So that's a quick way to lose money in 2024. The third one, and we're not going to dwell on it today, is flipping. I generally think that flipping in 2024 is going to be one of the most high-risk strategies, and 90 to 95% of the people will lose money. So it's not the market. The market conditions are not conducive to flipping. So we're not going to spend too much time on flipping, because if you can flip property in this market profitably, you're just that good that really, like, you shouldn't be flipping, because you should be like building assets for yourself. So flipping, beware to try to invent yourself as a flipper in 2024. The market conditions are not right. Losing money, way number 4, water. If you got a freestanding house, be careful of water consumption. I really recommend that you pursue prepaid metering on all utilities. And unfortunately, sectional titles, water prepaid, it's very, very rarely available, very, very rarely available. But if you are on a freestanding, contact a metering company and go on prepaid on your water as well. You're going to avoid situations where, there's a water spillage that's going to cost you 50,000 Rand because it went undetected and unreported by the tenant because they were away or they didn't care or anything like that. So water, prepaid utilities, take the risk management solution in place. Number 5, broken areas. What do I mean by broken areas? It means you're investing in places that are prone to rioting, social unrest, hijacking. Be very, very careful about investing in those areas. Number 6, commercial property sectional titles. Well, commercial property sectional titles are not to be done for investors. I can tell you out of my direct experience, commercial property sectional titles are only good for owner occupiers. And do not invest in commercial property sectional titles unless you plan to be a owner occupier, because the the market conditions, the rental growth, the vacancies, the rates, the cost are just going to blow up your investment very, very quickly. Losing money number 7, this is interesting. You expect interest rates to go down. Nobody knows if interest rates will go down. I don't know, I don't care, and you shouldn't sweat interest rates. We talked about it on numerous occasions. But if you expect interest rates to go down to actually make your property investments come right, you are running a very, very dangerous strategy. So here you can hope the interest rates go down, but don't plan or expect interest to go down. Don't buy on the expectation that interest rates might go down, because nobody knows, and that's a dangerous strategy. Losing money number 8, you don't negotiate with the banks. And this is really where also Christian is going to come into the equation just in a few minutes. There are 2 points where you have to negotiate with the banks. Number 1 is you have been paying your bond on time, in full for 6-12 months. Go and ask for a rate reduction. There was one of you 2 to 3 weeks ago that got a 1% reduction in interest rate on a bond with Standard Bank on a 1.6 million rand bond. That is a lot of money saved by taking simple action. And the other one is when you buy a property, and hopefully you're doing the smart thing and you're getting either Christian Jansen or Sharmel Williams from A360 Finance to help you raising that bond. Make sure that you get multiple approvals so that you can negotiate one interest rate of one bank against another bank. Christian and Sharmel will do that for you at no additional cost. Negotiate interest rates, and if you don't, you're leaving money on the table. And talking about negotiating, if in 2024 you're only negotiating on price, you're losing money. You gotta negotiate on terms of the deal, not just on price. I'm gonna give you a story, a real story, and we're gonna discuss about negotiations right throughout the next few episodes. So one of you was so smart in the most positive possible way that bought a property with a tenant, but wasn't necessarily happy with that tenant. And before taking transfer of the property, agreed with the seller that he would basically find a new tenant acceptable to the new owner, so that by doing so, you're starting from the day the property transfer, you have the right tenant at the right price. And this was just about negotiating. It's not going to cost more or less. The property is not going to cost more or less. It's just about negotiating. It's just a wonderful example of how you can make a lot more money. Or another example is, if you buy a property that is vacant, why don't you agree with the seller that you're going to place a tenant, and out of the money that you receive from the tenant prior to transfer, you will give them 50% of that. You're going to keep 50%. They'll take 50%. The property is empty. They're not getting any money. So for them, 50% is a great deal. You're making extra money before you even take transfer. And this is happening all the time. But if you don't ask, you don't get. So that's another one. And losing money number 10, you rely on the seller declarations form. This is about the conditions of the property. Do not trust the seller declaration form, because people still today lie through their teeth on seller declaration forms. They also don't know the true conditions of the property they sell. Agents largely don't care. It's really just like a tick compliance exercise. Always buy a property subject to inspection. Always buy a property and include in the offer to purchase, this offer is subject to acceptable inspection to be conducted within 7 to 10 days, 5 days from date of acceptance in writing of this offer. So that's really, really important. Losing money, number 11, poor insurance. I think there's not one day that goes past without a reminder of the impact of climate change. If you live in Johannesburg like I do, the last 2 days, especially yesterday, the storms have been absolutely wicked. So make sure that you've got the right insurance on your property, the right insurance on your body corporates, the right insurance on your life. And we're very blessed to have an incredible risk insurance and risk management expert in Paul Chatfield. So go reach out to him to make sure that your insurance is correct. And last but not least, and that's where Christian is going to come in, if you're going to buy, recently, one of the trends that seems to be happening because affordability is so stretched for many people with the increase in interest rates, that people are coming together to go to co-buy properties. And that's something that, just generally speaking, I'm not a big fan of at all. But Christian, if you're there, I'd like you to share with us, when it comes to co-buying, what are the rules of banks? What should property hackers do or not do when it comes to co-buying, and it comes to co-buying using a bond?
Hi, Carlo, and good evening, everybody. Great to now spend a bit of time on this side of the webinar. So one of the key things at all points in time is to define the relationship from the get-go. I mean, it's wonderful seeing so many hackers conversing and saying, right, I've got affordability, another one has time. How do you put that together? How do you define the relationship, and how do you mitigate risks? Because first and foremost, if let's use it as an example, say I've got ample time on my hands, I can go and find deals. Carlo has a massive bond affordability that I'm now going to help him fill up with the different banks, and obviously then with an equity stake for me. Many an instance you find people getting into partnership like this and say, right, we'll do all the profits on either rentals or sales on 50-50 basis. All fine and well, keep it simple. But this is where some of the big risks come in. Like from Carlo's perspective, every single bond that he applies for will influence his bond affordability. So if we take it on a blanket statement of you qualify for financing of 3 million Rand, we can go to each of the 4 banks and get that 3 million Rand. But each and every one of those banks picking up that affordability will, at a point, limit it. Similarly, so me doing all the grunt work and not having any affordability, I won't be able to present myself as an equal shareholder, and I won't be a director of that company either. So immediately you've got a massive lag and gap in terms of ownership and risk. How I find a couple of people mitigate that is by having the person doing the grunt work put on as a preferential shareholder. Set preference shares can also then translate into options that can be converted into normal shareholding. Once again, that comes down to the mechanics of how you put it together. If we now say, right, we are going to go and buy 8 properties. At the 8th property's registration, so that the whole process runs smoothly from a bank point of view, in other words, the originator just positioning Carlo as the director and shareholder and subsequent applicant, at that point, I will get appointed as a director, my options will vest, and I'll have a 50% shareholding. Great, wonderful, best case scenario situation. But now, what happens if things go wrong with the property? Especially if I don't have a budget and we find a couple of tenants from hell, or the property gets hijacked. And Carlo's deal was he's putting down the affordability, no cash. Now, all of a sudden, we're going to sit with a problem, especially if there isn't cash available. Because from my side, I won't be affected. I mean, I don't have any exposure. I don't have any property on my name. I'm not tied to the company in a way that creditors will come after me. Carlo, on the other hand, will have an adverse credit finding because he'll be the one that reneged on paying bond installments with the banks. If there's executions, sales, auctions, he may be liable for contribution. So if you, for example, buy a property for R1 million and it only and bond it for R1 million and it only gets sold for 800,000, that 200,000 shortfall could still be a liability on his side. So there's a massive, massive downfall that you need to also consider, and that's where the definition of the relationship is paramount. I've had many an instance of that. I can use a good example of three friends. This is a good 10 years ago, where they registered a trust together, and each of them said, right, we're each putting 2,000 Rand a month into this trust. We're going to buy properties. They bought 7 or 8 properties. And then at a point, the one friend got married, had a kid, then his wife lost her job, and all of a sudden his budget was shot, and he stopped contributing. And at a point, because, they're friends, so they give leeway. At a point, the other two said, but listen, hang on, we've been covering these costs for the past 2 years without him putting down a cent. Surely something's got to give. Getting him off of the fact that he was a co-surety to that those bonds on the trust, that in itself was quite a nightmare. Notwithstanding the fact that he, in effect, walked away with nothing, even though he contributed due to operational costs having built up in that entity. So there are so many ways that this can go right, it can go wrong. I would quite frankly be as blunt as saying that once you've defined that relationship, put down a proper shareholders agreement, make sure that every single element of it is defined, notwithstanding the fact that the shareholders agreement won't necessarily be applicable if you're not a shareholder yet. So it's a bit of an ebb and flow. Similarly so, if there's absolute distrust, where I'm at a point of me not having any specific say on that company, and Carlo says, okay, cool, thanks, dude. I've got my properties and I leave. What is my recourse? So you really need to focus on how you define that relationship for absolute worst case. It sucks to be negative when you put it together, but it will save you a hell of a lot of headache in the long run because every single element will be, to the greatest extent, defined.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you capture it quite nicely. It's almost like getting married without an ANC. Things go wrong. We know that I think about 50%, close to 50% of marriages don't last up to 10 years. And I think if you look at property partnerships, there are no statistics available. But if I just look at my experience with people coming to me, I can see that many of them don't end well because they've not been thought through in detail, and some of the tough questions have not been asked and have not been answered. So, and that's really where, to a large extent, maybe tapping into my experience to be the devil's advocate, to ask a few questions is, what about if this happened? What about if that happened? And going through that process. So partner by all means, but don't partner blindly. Don't go buy blindly, because I think there's a push in the market to get people to co-buy, because a lot of people want you to just buy and then they don't care what happens. They're not going to be there in 3 years' time. They're not going to be there in 7 years' time when you have a problem. They've made their money. They sold you the property, but you are still going to be around. So by all means, we always say, if you want to go fast, go on your own. If you want to go far, go with somebody, but don't go with anybody anywhere and start the journey without checking where are we going and what happens if we run out of water, what happens if we run out of fuel, what happens if we run out of laughter. That's I think that's a very, very important